Okay, Hafide Guam, welcome back to the Guam Guy Show. I have no idea what episode number this is, so I guess you'll see that in the title. Today we have a very special, kind of urgent episode. We're going to be talking about a proposal, maybe there's a better word for that, to make giant clams, otherwise known as Hima in our language, into an endangered species. So you've heard of federally recognized endangered species like, oh my God, I'm totally blanking out. Are wolves endangered species in the States?
Yes, but they've also allowed people to shoot them so that they could create highways and stuff.
Wow, we're jumping right into it. Okay, so a lot of marine mammals are endangered species. Wait, is that true, Brent?
A few are.
A few are.
Sperm whales, humpback whales.
Okay, so like I'm thinking plants, like Phyllanthus sfortii is an endangered species.
Cocoa bird.
Cocoa, thank you. Oh my God, like what?
Species.
I'm blanking out so hard on
sea hick, green sea turtle,
okay.
hawksbill.
Thank you. Okay, yeah. So we're trying to do that now for Hima or giant clams.
We're not trying to do that.
Okay, so it was a very inclusive there are people trying to do that. And so I guess I just got corrected right there. So yeah, maybe just a quick round of introductions and then we'll jump in. So Director Chelsea here with Department of Agriculture leading the way with this agency. And Frank Roberto, I don't know your title. Biologist. Brent, biologist to the umpteenth degree. Everybody knows Brent. We all know how he loves to be on camera in his news appearances. Okay, so...
He has the great radio voice that we all know and love and have grown up with.
Yeah, that too, really, eh? Yeah, you do have a really good radio voice. I don't. But we'll suffer it anyway. And so... where should we begin? Let's see. There was a meeting about this. Was it last month that was led by, was it NOAA? It was some federal agency, yes?
Yes.
I didn't even hear about that. So what was that meeting about? And
well, the meeting was Tuesday. Wait, what's today? The 20th? It was on the 17th. So Tuesday. Yes, the meeting was Tuesday.
Oh, this week. Okay.
At in the middle of the afternoon, 1 to 4 p.m. was the public engagement period. And then from 6 to 8 was the public hearing component. And we had encouraged NOAA to publicize it in more visible arenas and formats, but that didn't really happen. I think that the public who did showed up because we issued a press release the day before the hearing to announce our public engagement events in October.
Okay, so yeah, there's two things happening. One happened. One is the federal, public engagement aspect, and now there's going to be a Guam Department of Agriculture led public engagement opportunity. Okay, is it still? But this is a federal project, so how does DAR, Division of Aquatic and Wildlife Resources, come into play?
The reason we would like to have a public engagement event is that leading up to NOAA's event, we had been in bi-weekly meetings with them. These guys more so than I. I was in the first one and then was unable to attend the subsequent ones, but they fully participated, and the purpose of the meetings was NOAA's attempt or effort to have more inclusive public engagements events. And this all stemmed from other proposed rules that are on the agenda. Increasing the monument size of the Pacific remote island areas off of Honolulu, and it became a really contentious issue, and it was going to negatively impact American Samoa's economy and the workforce there. So NOAA was pushed into having more public engagement events, because typically their modus operandi is we'll have a public hearing one day in the middle of the week from 6 to 8, advertised in the Federal Register. Whoever shows up, and then that's where they get public comment. And it's usually fewer than 10 individuals, often professionals or subject matter experts who are aware of the issue, and that's it. So America's Samoa's concern pushed them to have more inclusive events, and American Samoa had it where they invited everyone from their community to come and provide testimony about how it was going to impact them. And so we touted it after that as a game changer for NOAA, that this is what they need to elevate their efforts up to fully engage with the community and make it a more fair process. So that's why they wanted to have the bi-weekly meetings with us. And unfortunately, it just doesn't appear that that's what happened with the event. The suggestions that were made were not what was followed.
Okay, so that's why you're having your own round with it?
Yes. So we're kind of picking up the pieces, and we want to ensure that our community is fully aware and informed about this proposed rule for listing the giant clams and how they can provide meaningful, effective comments about the issue, and just get more engagement and more communication between our community and the federal agencies that are going to be holding these types of events or proposed rules. Because as soon as this one is completed, if it comes to what they're assuming would be the logical conclusion, then the next step is going to be critical habitat, which is another.
Let's put a pin in that, because we'll get there. So I'm coming into this maybe a little naive. I did try to make some calls and shoot some messages around and put on my social media to just try to solicit some opinions, questions, thoughts, and so on. So I will probably sound more prepared than I am. Well, it's going to be juxtaposed with really well prepared and not at all prepared. So if I ask some naive questions, just anticipate that. Maybe it's a good idea to start with what our prehistoric record and historic record with giant clams are. Brent, maybe or Frank, if either of you want to jump in. We have a list of species on the TV behind us. Do we have all of those here?
I think Brent can better explain this.
Okay, we don't. We have in the fossil record, we have a species that Tridactylgaigus, the giant clam, was here historically, but died out before people arrived to Guam. I think the most recent records are about 10,000 years old, or something like that. We also had a hippopus that apparently was extinct soon after people arrived. It probably weren't very abundant anyway, and people finished them off and made them no longer extinct. So they've been gone for thousands of years anyway. Tridactyla durasa is one that was introduced here, brought in for aquaculture purposes, probably not native here. We only have 2 native species now, and for the proposed listing, the 2 species found in Guam are not endangered. They are only threatened, but part of the listing is that things, because of similarity of appearance, species that look like species that are endangered, they will probably be treated as the endangered species as far as things like commerce or trade or sales or jewelry making, things like that. They will be treated. They virtually will be endangered because you can't tell them apart.
So not that they'll be endangered because there's so few of them, but just in how they're treated legally and so on.
Correct. Yeah, they will only be threatened. Their status will only be threatened, not endangered. But
think profiling.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is, but the regulation is that they would probably be treated as endangered because you can't tell them apart from the endangered species.
Okay, so that I guess that speaks to a practical aspect if this comes to be and is enforced. Is I have a beautiful sanahi with a bunch of spondylus beads going all the way up to the back. Shout out to my friend Lopaka, and I like to, when I travel, like when I go to DC or wherever, I like to wear that with pride. I usually wear this one spondylus pendant here, but depending on the occasion, I will break that out for the sanahi for the special occasions. And it would feel pretty bad to be stopped, And so from a practical standpoint, if it comes to be, and it is listed as an endangered species, so if it's just like, well, we can't tell what it is, so we're going to treat it as if it is the actual endangered ones.
Yes.
Okay. So, but I was talking to someone who's I'm not going to name, but I asked, what's the best we can hope for? It sounds like there's no turning the boat around. There's no stopping the train. It's gonna happen. These are gonna be federally listed endangered species protected animals. So, what can we do now, or is it all too late? Like, what's the best we can hope for? Anything, Frank?
Now, I mean, I think the most that we can do is just have as much people attend this public hearing and just give their comments and see how that may sway the decision with the federal government on this proposed listing determination.
It's not correct to assume that this is the end all be all. They had issued a proposed rule for critical habitat for endangered coral, and we were able, through the submission of comments, to get them to retract the rule and rewrite it. So it's not the end just because they're proposing something, which is why we want to encourage public engagement, public education, and then public comment. And our thought is that we need to submit substantive comments based on science, which is what like the information Brent just shared. But there's also the aspect of economic development that this is going to impact. Commerce, our ability to engage in commerce. This is the livelihoods of people that we're talking about. And then there's the religious component. I mean, in my opinion, this is a violation of our civil rights to engage in religious beliefs. I mean, you carry that Sanahi with you because it's meaningful to you. It's your connection to your ancestors, our ancestors, and to tell us that we cannot or will no longer be allowed to wear that. And that's a sign of strength for us when we wear it proudly, when we go to meetings or federal meetings or travel with it as our, a representation of our culture and our ties to our lineage. And to say that we can't, I mean, like you said, that's going to feel really bad for you. So imagine all the thousands of other people from Guam who do that, or people in the States who are from Guam or have ties to Guam that will no longer be able to do that either. So we believe that those are some of the umbrellas that they can house their comments under.
So yeah, like, what do you call it? So overtly religious or not, with the Sanahi, imagine trying to tell a Christian Catholic they can't wear a crucifix or on a necklace anywhere. And so it feels, even though it's not an overtly religious thing, it's equally culturally powerful, in my opinion. And that's why I felt the urgency. I just found out about this, what is it, like 48 hours ago, 50 some hours ago. And so I'm like, guys, let's get together. Okay, so it can still be, so if I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly, and I'm not at all familiar with these laws, it's even if it becomes a federally, even if it becomes an Endangered Species Act protected, we can still push the rules that govern its use in commerce and so on, to some degree or another.
Well, so right now it's a proposed rule, so it isn't final yet. So this is a version of it. This is a bill that's been introduced in our legislature. And what they held was a public hearing, but the public hearing period has been extended, or it's up till October 24th, where we can submit comments. So that's the period that we're in right now.
There's a local legislature aspect
No.
to this?
I'm drawing the...
it's a comparison.
The comparison,
okay.
so that you can see what the process is right now. So it's not a law yet. So it's just a bill.
I'm just kind of assuming it will be, whether, is that a fair assumption?
That's giving up. No, I'm not there yet.
Okay. Okay.
We fight the good fight till the end.
Okay, cool. I don't know. I assume that it's just going to happen, and now, okay, so I will take that back and proceed as if not as if, but that we will still, have some opportunity to affect the outcome. So speaking of how we're planning to use, you, agriculture, have a project ongoing with trying to import some giant clams. Is it from Palau or Yap?
Yes, it's from Palau. So basically, it's a community clam farm project, small scale project where we're just importing 1,000 clams from Palau. So
a small project importing 1,000 clams from another country.
Small scale. But
all at once, or what?
No, so that's actually part of the experimental phase where we brought in 300 clams of 3 different species, of which are going to be listed as endangered. But we brought in 300 to test the quarantine facility. But that's besides the point. So what it is the 3 species that we brought in are going to be listed as endangered, and for right now, when we brought them in, we just needed a CITES permit for those. But with this listing, if it does go through, I will need to get a CITES permit, and I would have to get a Section 10 permit, which has a 6 to 12 month review process. So basically,
just a lie.
What's a CITES permit?
Can you help me with CITES?
Yeah, CITES is an international agreement. CITES is an acronym for the Convention in International Trade in Endangered Species, and it regulates the trade in species between countries. If a country considers a species to be endangered in their boundaries, there are regulations against trading it across international boundaries, and countries sign up to be members of CITES, of which the U.S. is a member of CITES, which Guam falls under the U.S. blanket under the CITES signature. And one of the things is, Director mentioned how it can impact us financially. Guam is virtually the only place under the U.S. CITES blanket that can grow giant clams. So if giant clams wanted to be brought to the States for food, for jewelry, for the pet trade, Guam can do it quite easily. Nowhere else can do it easily because everywhere else has to require CITES documentation first. If they become endangered, we lose that benefit or that advantage, and that would affect certainly financially our ability to deal with clams with the mainland, because we're equally at a disadvantage as everybody else now, and so we'd be competing against maybe cheaper labor, bigger quantities. Where if it's only CITES addressing the giant clam trade on Guam, we have an advantage over everyone else because we're the only place that can grow giant clams under the U.S. CITES blanket.
Okay, so this is part of my surprise in kind of reaching out to people and just seeing the how people are talking about it and writing about it. So the conservationist in me is, I'm like, ooh, we want to list something as an endangered species. Well, that's sad, but it probably sounds like a good idea just in general. To protect threatened and endangered species just at face value. It sounds like a good idea, but everything I'm hearing is kind of pointing the other way, that like we're losing our power to control what's going on in our land and waters. So it's kind of just being given up to the federal government, and this is not a bash against the federal government. I think it's about kind of personal responsibility and empowerment. Even if we don't have these species either, we'll go back to your project, Frank. Is it going to be harder to get them in, or would how you have things going is already in? Because I'm really excited about your project. So it's like, I used to live in Australia. I don't know if you guys knew that. I lived in Australia. I was an underwater photographer on the Great Barrier Reef for my first year in Australia. The second year is a funny story I'm not going to tell on TV, on camera. And I've also been diving in Palau, and you just see these massive giant clams. Like I'm like, oh, maybe I'm misremembering it, because the ones here are ones that we still have. The biggest one I've seen is, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 inches long, and the one I took off my freediving fin, I put it next to it, and it's actually longer than my fin. I'm like, man, I would love to bring those back here, even though, Brent, you said they went extinct 10,000 years ago locally.
Yeah.
Okay, but if there's a hope to bring them back, I am all in for that. So what species, you said you brought 300 here, 3 different species, but what species are those?
So I brought back hippopus, which will be
Can you say that again?
Hippopus.
As there's a spell that's gonna happen or something. I don't know, it's like it's something between Harry Potter and the one with those 3 witches that everyone likes to sing those songs.
Hocus Pocus.
That's the one. Yeah. Okay.
Hocus Pocus, Hippopus.
Hippopus. Okay, and then what else?
So that'll be listed as threatened. The 2 in these species that'll be listed as endangered is Tridacna gigas, which is the true
the really giant one.
Yeah, and Tridacna dorasa.
Okay. Is Gigas?
I hear Gigas. I hear Gigas.
Okay.
But we say Gigas.
I'm just gonna try to rotate through the different pronunciations. Okay, so do any of the other ones come that close, or is it just that one is far and away the bigger than the rest?
Dorasa is the second largest, and it gets about half the size of Gigas.
Oh wow!
So Gigas is by far the largest of them.
Okay. How many? So you brought was it 100 of each, or
125 of each? So it was 375.
Okay.
We were just testing them in quarantine, but so the reason why we chose those 3 is because the availability of of Maximo, which won't be listed as endangered, but still will be listed for similarity of appearance. But anyway, just saying. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. What were we were talking about?
You were bringing them in, and then the challenge would be, or you brought them in to raise them here. But what would the challenge be with this?
True. So the challenge with this ruling, it would just basically I won't be able to bring in those 3 species without a Section 10 permit, which has that almost 1 year processing period, which would push back the timeline of any of my projects, and having to obtain that permit 1 year before I try to implement any project, it's just not feasible for us to try to move forward, even with just a small scale a small scale clam community farming project.
And so the reason I blurted out the word lie is because they give you that time frame of 6 to 8 months. You hope for a year. We have permits that we've been waiting for more than 2 years for a project. So imagine trying to raise these clams, putting in all that effort, and then waiting for 2 years for a permit to even be able to either bring them in or put them out. The irony of that is that we can raise them and grow them and then not be allowed to put them out into the ocean, which was the entire purpose, because they're endangered. And what we're trying to do is restore them to their environment or have them for us in our environment, and we are not allowed to.
There's a twisted sort of irony here. Okay. So where are the clams you have now?
So the clams that we did bring in for quarantine didn't survive the 4-month period, which was expected, which is why we just brought in the first the first portion, which was 375.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're waiting to ship the remaining 625, but not all at once. Still smaller batches. That's just to test them in quarantine, but we want to outplant them as soon as we can. Mm-hmm. So this is just to make sure that the 1,000 clams that we had paid for and planned to bring in, that we don't just
kill them all at once. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, makes total sense.
This is all experimental. This is the first time that we've done something like this, so we want to make sure that we're handling these clams with care and make sure that we
and
still
that
everything off.
prior experience gave Frank a really great insight into the term that they can sit in quarantine and what would be needed and what upgrades are needed to the quarantine area so that we can ensure their survival.
Can I ask, are you allowed to share where the quarantine is? Or?
Sure, yeah. So we had a really good collaboration with the Aquarium of Guam.
Okay.
I needed to find a place where we could hold these clams, so I called Aquarium of Guam. I was like, hey, I know that we keep other species for recovery there. Are we able to hold the clams? And they said, yes, of course. We've been following your story, and if we can get involved, then sure, absolutely. So it was really great, like right from the start. So when we brought them in, we made sure to keep track of their water quality conditions, and so that if there was any type of like mass mortality, then we'd be able to pinpoint where exactly. So basically, like I said, it's all experimental to see what aspects of the quarantine facility we need to improve on and make sure that these species survive.
Okay, cool. Where are you at now with the project in your timeline?
So right now we're in the stages of importing the second batch, but with this ruling, I want to see how this is going to turn out first to see if I'm going to need to just hold off on that or move forward. We'll just see what So
okay.
I'm not too sure what's going to happen right now, but it does take a year for them to determine the proposed listing. So if I can get those clams here as soon as I can, put them out in the ocean, then maybe that'd be a better idea.
Mm-hmm. How long is the quarantine period?
Well, this quarantine period was 4 months, but that was only because we didn't have the enclosures ready out in the water with the village community. So if we do bring them in, we plan to outplant them within that week that we have them.
Are those locations, like the enclosures, is that a fancy word for cage? Are you going to...
No, it's actually not a cage because there's no covering at the top. It's just 10 rebar in a circle or an ellipse, and you just cover it with construction barrier. Mm-hmm. So it's just it's similar to the ones that they have in Palau. So we're just kind of testing this community farming technique here in Guam to see if we can get the community together to care for this type of farm and see how far it can go. Mm-hmm. And then what we learn from that, we can see if we need better security in future grants, or at least we can try to get the people involved first and then see if we need to get higher technology involved in this type of project.
Okay, so is there some landowners you're working with or something, or?
So the mayors, we have the mayors of Inalahan and Malesu that are fully on board with the project, and these will be in water enclosures. So we just choose what part of the reef that we want to put them in, and it'll be surveilled by the village, and just the entire strategy is just a community effort. And if we can just see what happens with that first, then we can move on.
Okay, so there's a lot of cynicism, some of which I share, like. All right, I'm sure you've gotten this. I've seen you talk to people about this, and I'm sure you've heard people have told you it's like, boy, you put that anywhere, and anyone knows it's gone the next day. Okay, so
yeah, absolutely. You know, if it gets stolen within the next day or two, at least it'll be documented in this project. And when I apply for future grants, I could say, hey, we tried doing the community technique, and they were stolen in one day, so now I'm applying for cages with locks and cameras and things like that. So
okay,
yeah.
Oh, that's probably part of permitting too. It's like, well, we want you to do as little as possible, and it says, hey, that didn't work. Let's try this. Okay, so it's just okay, cool, very pragmatic.
Yeah.
All right,
it's more like a phase. So this project wasn't just to solve clam farming, right, or to just really promote it.
That's what I do. I come in with this hero complex. I'm like, we're gonna solve it, and then every single time it's like, damn, we didn't solve it.
Yeah. So it's definitely a phased project, and this was just phase one, and then we get slapped with the endangered species.
Okay, very smart, very responsible. Okay, so it sounds like you have time maybe to do a couple of rounds, or at least one. Maybe I would just bum rush it. If I can help, let me know. Seriously.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Cool. Chelsea, you look like you wanted to jump in on something. Is there anything you wanted to say, but you were held back?
Well, it's with the comment that you made about, being a conservationist and, hearing that something's going to be listed as an endangered species, and your inclination is to presume that, oh, that's a great idea, that'll help conserve it and preserve it, and, so that they can maybe bring it back. And I was I was I was a hippie in high school, I figure. I'm just maybe reincarnated from that time frame, because that's always been the mindset that I had. But going through these federal processes, I've learned so much about what it is when something's listed, and it takes away the state's power, or for us, excuse me, in this instance, it's Guam's power. And our ability to manage our resources for ourselves, because then everything we do needs permission and approval from people who do not live here, people who do not live with the resources. I mean, look, there's the prime example about the species that were identified, and they're not even in our waters, and they're not. One of them, I think, isn't even from here. But yet, that's the stance, and that's gonna impact everything else that we're doing. And we saw this with coral critical habitat. We're waiting for the final rule for the green sea turtle habitat, critical habitat, and now there's the giant clams being listed. And what's going to come right after, if any are listed, is critical habitat.
Yeah, so let's go down that one. So you were saying critical habitat. I mean, I have an idea what critical habitat is, and it's just like some special place where if we don't take care of it, then certain animals or plants or whatever die, or they struggle along. But tell me why my intuition is not quite on target, or just straight up wrong, and what it actually means in practice.
Speaking freely, and our subject matter experts are absolutely free to jump in and correct me, but critical habitat doesn't work, or it hasn't been proven to work.
Oh.
Even with the coral, we asked NOAA to provide evidence that any critical habitat areas that they've designated in prior years have had a beneficial effect for the species, and they can't. Because it doesn't.
Is it are we speaking just for Guam, or
no,
big picture? Big picture.
Oh. So the idea of critical habitat and the endangered species was created, it has something to do with the Antiquities Act, but it was more of a terrestrial approach to conserving species. Like you said, with the wolves, or beavers and gerbils.
So hard.
I don't know. I'm not the bio.
It's probably maybe a ferret.
The field mice. But now, with the idea of having coral critical habitat, what they're saying is, if there are conditions that exist in your waters where the coral were observed, and in this case it'll be where the clams have been observed. So if there are any reports that clams existed in Hagåtña Bay, in Alahan, Molesso, then those are the areas that they're going to look at, and they're going to see if those conditions that a clam needs to survive exist. So let's say they need sandy bottoms and, I don't know, rocky and sandy bottom and free-flowing water or something. I'm just making this up. But if that's what they need to exist, and if those exist in those places, then those places are going to be designated critical habitat. And if they've been seen, the green sea turtle one was really funny because they swim everywhere. So basically all around Guam, all the waters that 0 to 3 miles is state waters. And if the turtles were seen in any of those areas, then that's critical habitat, or if they can exist in those areas.
So there's nowhere that's not critical habitat.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then they'll come at us and say, well, critical habitat isn't going to impact the regular person. It's only going to impact projects that have federal funds or are led by federal agencies. For the island of Guam, that's most projects. Most agencies on Guam have federally funded projects. So it's not limited to just NOAA-funded projects, but it's any federal agency. And then private citizens can be impacted by that as well. So in this case, if we're talking about in the water, where we deploy our FADs, how we deploy our FADs, our shallow water mooring buoys, where we put those out, or if we want to have a project to remove the silt from Boat Basin and Hagåtña, what is it? Not Hagåtña Boat Basin. Agua Marina. Then those are federally funded projects, and that's going to impact. It'll impact that because that means we now have to go to NOAA for an additional permit. So it creates another layer of bureaucracy. And sometimes, as we've seen, that bureaucracy can take up to 2 years or more just to get approved. So any project that has that connection, or they call it a federal nexus, is going to require an intervention from NOAA, even if it's not a NOAA-related project.
Okay, so we keep saying the word federal, but I think some of this might go over some people's heads. But this is affecting everybody. So, like you mentioned, getting the silt out of Boat Basin or Agate Marina, and this is where our businesses are. People have their boats in there. They take out the tourists. That's their income. And if it's if we have a need to make a repair or fix something, it just becomes that much harder, longer, and more expensive. You talked about what was it? What was another one you mentioned? Well, you didn't mention this, but I want to shout out your team, Guam Coral Reef Initiative. They have I volunteered with them.
Exactly.
And
planting coral.
Yeah, so raising and planting coral, and that's habitat for our fish. Like if you like reef fish, then you better like the reef, and you better like the coral, because that's where they live. That's where they raise their fish babies. Baby fish is usually how people say that. Whatever. What other examples?
So one of my favorite examples that I think is worth considering is that, let's say you're a property owner and you want to build your house. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter where, but you have over an acre of property that's going to be developed. When you have over an acre of property that's going to be developed, that triggers the need for an EPA Clean Water Act permit. That's a federal nexus, so that will trigger this. That even if it has nothing to do with NOAA, mm-hmm. they're going to have to push that project through NOAA just to get clearance and approval, because that is a federal nexus that triggers a relationship.
All right, so devil's advocate, not saying NOAA or anybody or the federal government's the devil, but just devil's advocate.
I didn't say that. You said that.
I'm saying I'm not saying that, but just devil's advocate. If everywhere is already critical habitat, then is this going to make it any worse?
It's another layer. It's another review. It's a completely different person reviewing.
Oh my. Okay, so it absolutely is going to add more hurdles.
And then if you ask them, are they getting funding for any additional personnel to review these permits? The answer is always no. And then I believe on the 17th, someone had asked the question, who's going to pay to have, let's say Farron's going through the airport, his property gets seized because he's wearing, or Franken, his beautiful Hima piece right here, and it gets seized. Who's going to pay for the inspection or the test to determine that that's not a listed species? Mm-hmm. And the federal answer is, we don't know, but not us.
Okay. So that sucks. Now, this is depressing. Like
It absolutely is depressing.
not gonna lie, like I'm like, when you say we want to protect something, I'm usually like the first in line cheerleading it. But the realities of, action and regulation are not, working in sync. It's and it's sounding pretty obvious. I would love to speak with someone on the other side of this that would, I guess, represent someone who does support this. I guess I'm still an open mind, but I'm definitely leaning one way right now. Now, let's get to the kind of the carvers. So like we're wearing pieces that are represent our culture and so on. And so, is there an intelligent comment? And by intelligent, I mean a comment written in such a way, saying a certain message or messages that will be compelling to NOAA or whoever the reviewers are.
I believe that it would have to be a comment aligned with the practice of their religious freedom, and excuse me, and that this is their business. This is how they make the money that they have to feed their families and pay for their homes and support themselves. So it's debilitating for them economically.
So I'm going to take a shot at this. So if I'm a carver and I think I have carved like 2 beads just to go on this, and they both like have broke, and this is still lasted. So imagine what that says about me. But I'm still a dreamer. I'm like, maybe I'll be a really good carver someday. But let's say I'm a friend of mine. Say someone who actually made this, Jared. Sorry, bro, I'm blanking out on your last name. Cadahay. Jared Cadahay made this one. And I won it in a raffle. So shout out to Jared anyway. And let's say I'm Jared or my friend Lopaka who made my Sinahi. And if I wanted to write a comment or voice my opinion, I'd just be like, hi, my name is this. I am a traditional carver, and I have been for all these years. It's something that's gone on in my family, and we have historically relied on this as income. To feed our families, and also as a celebration of our culture and our identity. I do not support this, and if it does come to pass, there has to be some way of me continuing my craft, livelihood, and practice of my culture. Is that an effective comment, or is that just all emotion?
Well, it's both. But I would add emphasis, and I haven't even read the paper template about how to submit a comment, because the comments we always submit are point-based and based on science. Although sometimes we do have like 1 or 2 in there that'll be with an emotional or link to our cultural aspect. But yes, that they've been doing this for how many generations, how many years. It's supported their family. They would lose a substantial portion of their income without the ability to sell this jewelry or to trade it for other materials or other resources.
Okay, so like the reason I bring about emotion. So just a message to the listeners is like I think when you're reviewing something, you generally just kind of leave emotion at the door. It's just like, this makes me sad. It's like, okay, that doesn't tell me really anything, and so you have to give like reasons that can be measured numerically, either quantitatively, you can quantify it, or qualitatively, where you can make up a scale and kind of judge it by that scale, and it can apply kind of to everybody. And so we have the cultural bit, we have a bit of a financial bit. Frank, anything?
Yeah, I was going to say with your statement, so what we're going to do with the workshop is we're going to teach people how to write a public comment, and usually
You could have told me to stop talking earlier.
Yeah, I was swayed by what you're saying. But so yeah, we'll be holding a workshop during the public forum, and we'll be teaching the participants how to write a public comment. And 2 very important components of the public comment is to make sure that it's unique and it has supporting statements. So what you said is unique, as you say, like our emotions are pretty unique to ourselves, right? So if we can just give an account of how it makes us feel, but if we also include something within that comment that's a supporting statement, like you said, I've been doing it for so many years and I provide for my family, I feel like that's a pretty well-rounded comment already within itself. So
would like, if people would be down to share how much of their income, like 30% of my income.
I was thinking that too, to quantify the economic impact to them. And what's frustrating is that it came to my attention that someone had also made this statement on the 17th that, you're trying to protect these clams, but who's going to protect my culture? So if I can't wear these anymore, if I can't share these anymore, then that's an aspect of our culture that is essentially dying or has to go underground, and we're no longer allowed to perpetuate that. So what are you protecting? Okay. And for whom?
So I had a couple.
But that's not going to be a good comment. So
yeah, I had a couple comments. Oh yeah, that is just basically an emotion-based comment, isn't it? I did have something here, and there's some typos because it was written on WhatsApp. So I'm just going to kind of paraphrase. So we already have like these CITES protected species, and so on, and so we're still going to be able to, I guess, harvest the ones we have and do whatever. It's coming in or out of our borders where it's going to be a problem. Is that accurate enough for the species that we do have here?
It depends on how strictly they enforce similarity of appearance. If we can show that the species that are being worked with here are the threatened ones, then it won't affect much more than what CITES already does for international trade in them. But if they're going to enforce that because of similarity of appearance, we can't tell, so we have to treat these like they're endangered. We can't farm them. We can't put them out on the reef for restoration. We can't move them to a safer area. We know that with climate change coming, we are heading towards a more El Nino climate where we're living. El Nino has caused bleaching of giant clams in years past. We need to move them to deeper water to avoid that.
I saw some today.
We also have had poaching of clams in the past in very shallow water. If we want to give them a refuge from poaching, we need to move them to deeper water. If these clams are being treated because of similarity appearance like the endangered ones, we cannot do either of those things without the permits that Frank mentioned that might be years in the taking. And 2 years waiting for a permit, those things will probably all be dead anyway.
So it's with federal protection comes in writing. Is it fair to say there's no actual person in doing any protecting? Is there federal enforcement entities, regulators here that are patrolling or anything like that? Is that
no? It's primarily
nonsense?
border stuff. Although if there is an arrest based on a species that is federally listed, they'll usually let it be prosecuted in federal court here because the prosecution and the penalties are more severe. But not the enforcement. The enforcement is still generally up to local enforcement, and then the prosecution, the federal system takes over.
Okay, so
and he mentioned climate change, which I want to point out is another reason this ESA listing and even under the coral, the critical habitat designation is so frustrating for state managers, is that these species are getting listed because of their decline. Their decline is caused by Mother Nature, human-caused impacts to Mother Nature, through climate change and global warming and the warming of the oceans. That's a large reason why the coral have died off. They bleach and die. We've lost clams that way. So we're being held to those consequences and limited in our ability to reverse those impacts because of something that we can't control and had no cause in.
Yeah, it's like a twisted kind of irony. It's like, this federal recognition is going to protect them from protection.
Yes.
So, like, we'll lose our, just if I'm understanding it correctly, we'll lose our ability to really do anything. Maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but...
it doesn't feel like an exaggeration if it's going to take, even let's say it takes 6 months for a permit to get through. That 6 months of we saw them die at 4. So, and what's the point? Why do we need a permit to put them out? How are we negatively impacting the environment by putting them out in the ocean to try and grow, thrive, and multiply?
I mean, I have permits from you guys, from Ag, so thanks for issuing me those permits, like permits for stuff on land and in the water for like after Typhoon Mawar, clearing, typhoon debris from the hiking trails, for getting Crown of Thorns out of the water. And so, So I just want to point out to the listeners is that when she says, "Why do we need a permit?" Like she is a permitting. They are a permitting agency, so they actually do know what they're doing. It's like, why do they need a permit to do stuff that you already know what you're doing?
Exactly.
Okay. So it's not. So you and me, listeners, when we say why do we need a permit, there's usually a good reason. And every time I apply for a permit for something, it's like, make sure you do these things. I'm like, okay, thanks for telling me. Okay. All right, we got about 15 minutes, so we're going to try to keep this under an hour. So let's walk through that airport scenario. I go to somewhere, and I fly somewhere. I come back home. I'm wearing my sinahi around my neck. You can see it up on my chest. Who's going to be the one that says, "Come here, boy," or "Wait," or "Sir"? Right, it was professional said it. "Come here, sir. Can I have a look at that?" Who says that? Who?
Would it be customs?
I assume it would be Customs and Border Protection.
Okay, so which is the one? Is it the which is the one that checks your bags?
Customs and Border Protection.
That's the one. Okay, and the other one is immigration, right?
Yes.
That checks your passport. Okay, that's got to be really awkward for those guys, you know.
But it's not just here. This is if you're in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a federal rule. They'll have to enforce it there.
Oh my!
Without even knowing what it looks like. They're going to see this thing that looks like it's white and might be the shell that they just got that memo about that said people aren't supposed to be transporting that anymore. Sir, that looks like this. We need to take that from you.
Damn. Yeah. Wow. So it's both ways. Yeah. Okay. So.
Or Nana, you're going to see your son in Washington, and she's wearing a cute little piece like Frank's. I'm sorry, ma'am, you're going to have to give us that.
Mm-hmm.
And she's going to be wondering why, but it doesn't matter. You know, officers will come and say, hey, you have to give that up. It's this thing. It says that this clamshell is protected. It's endangered. You can't take that with you.
And although this may not be made from the endangered, the ones that are listed as endangered, due to the similarity of appearance, they can still take it away.
Okay, so.
Or think of FESPAC.
Mm-hmm.
When FESPAC happens in another country in the next 4 years, and all of the artisans want to bring back stuff, the people who have the adzes and whatever other historical uses that Hima were used for, and them trying to get that into those countries.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, sorry, just a quick shout out for, or explainer for people that say, you know, the sanahi is not even like jewelry. Yeah, like we still wear it, you know, it's for, we don't know what it was for, it was used for fishing. And, you know, so when you wear it around your neck, you know, that's not really, I'm like, dude, so what? You know, culture is,
it evolves.
Constantly changing. You know, we had 2 major migrations here, right? Like maybe 4,000 years ago or a little less. And then, about 1,000 years ago again. And I don't think the Chamorros in the year, 1020 are talking to the Chamorros in the year 980 and are like, hey, that's not our culture, blah, 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 or maybe they did, but, it's our part of our culture today. And we've lost a lot. We've lost more than enough. And so if we're trying to reclaim things or try to continue our culture, not invent things necessarily, but continue our culture in ways that we deem appropriate and that we agree to as a people, then so what? Like, people wear fish hooks around their necks, like they carve fish hooks. I'm like, did the ancient Chamorros do that? No, they use them to fish, and so, but we still do that. And no one says anything about that. So. Like it or not, it is part of our culture now. That is I would say firmly cemented in there, and it's become part of our identity as much as anything else. As much as Kelaguen is, I don't know if we have a native citrus, but like if you're gonna try to challenge it and say Kelaguen isn't a Chamorro food, people are gonna throw hands over that.
Well, Brent had a great explanation for some of the historical uses, that it was like the hardest substance that they had around at that time when the Bronze Age happened. Like, there wasn't bronze here.
Mm-hmm.
And Hima shell was, and that's why most of the historic findings of Hima are for adzes, for things to use to carve other things with, because it was so much harder than things that were. It was harder than things that were available that were usable. I mean, volcanic rock is harder, but it's hard to make something out of a big chunk of volcanic rock. A shell is something that can be shaped and modeled and used for something to carving or trenching or something where other materials aren't as hard or aren't as durable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that would be one. Yeah, I have a few adzes I've made myself, all metal blades though, but I have one that's the root from Manila agao, that's the invasive agao, and then I have a couple from EFIT actually they were doing some clearing for for one of the military projects up north, and
Camp laws.
yeah, that's probably it. I had an opportunity to get some of the wood from there, and from what I understand is how we used to use the Hima blade is, it would just shatter if you're trying to work wood directly. So you'd have to kind of like burn it and chip off the char and the ash, and then chip off the char as you go along and so on. But yeah.
Step up to a call.
Go ahead, buddy. Okay. So do we give, as I understand it, we already have to issue permits if somebody wants to export some CITES permit-controlled species from here to another place?
Well, for CITES, yes.
Okay.
They have to do a permit from us and a federal permit.
Okay.
If it's a CITES species or a CITES issue. We try to give certificate of origins for anything leaving Guam, just so we have a record of what's leaving Guam. People want to take shell collections back to the mainland or something like that. Not a CITES issue, but we still ask that they get a certificate of origin, just so we know the quantity and the species that are leaving Guam.
Mm-hmm. So it's if this, assuming this comes to pass, and we're not assuming that, but just for conversation's sake, is there already a framework there to kind of help us out? Like if we do travel or send things back or forth, that we can still facilitate that even if it's harder?
Well, they would still have to get the same permit from us, but then they would also need to go through the federal permitting process, which is more cumbersome. And so, yeah, I mean, people will come, 2 weeks before they're leaving island and say, I'd like to take these with me, and we can process a permit pretty quickly. If they're doing that and they need a federal permit, it can be months before that permit is ready. And they're not generally thinking that far in advance if they're leaving island. They've got a million other things they have to take care of if they're leaving island. And getting that permit is not usually high on the list. And so they do run the risk, and it has happened for other things like corals and things, that people have packed it up, send it to the mainland, and maybe that's one thing else is there are states that have regulation against some of these things as well. So it'd be okay to take coral from one place, but you can't take coral into Florida, maybe, or something like that. So they move to Florida, and the stuff gets seized when they arrive at their final destination too. So a federal listing of this, I mean, will probably make it harder to go to any state as well, because states will also have regulations against endangered species coming in or out, where before it was listed they didn't have that control as well.
Okay, so this is not sounding good for supporting this, but I do have a comment here from at Possum Pulan. I think that's a cat meme with Pulan. Anyway, Patreon supporter, so thanks for helping me out there. I'm just going to paraphrase. So, there's acknowledgement for the concern to carvers and their income and our traditions and so on. But just as a counterpoint, maybe to support it, would this, you mentioned Camp Blas, Chelsea, would this kind of help resist any kind of military buildup if you're of the sort that wants to resist it or not, whichever?
I don't understand the question.
So would having a more endangered species make it harder to do to support the buildup?
They're not even.
It's non sequitur.
Yeah.
Totally non sequitur. Okay.
One point for that though is that when critical habitat is designated, DoD is exempt because of the Sykes Act.
Okay.
So what has raised my fury is that DoD gets a pass for the work that they do, the conservation work that they do through their integrated national or natural resource management projects, their NREM projects, which is the exact same work that we do. The people at this agency have been doing the work for many years more than the military have been, but we do not get a pass. We do not get any sort of consideration for the work that's already being done. We still get slapped with the critical habitat, or gets imposed upon us. So what we want to do
So no consolation prize.
No.
Okay.
The righteous fury in me wants to, after the election, when we have a congressperson in place, is push the issue of allowing state agencies in territorial jurisdictions to be granted the same waiver that is granted to DOD in our lands for doing the work that we do when they're doing the same work. We should be granted that same waiver.
This sounds similar to another question I got from Dr. Lori Raimondo from the Marine Lab. She says there's tribal rights with some ESA listed species, Endangered Species Act, in the states. Is this something like we're trying to that
No,
maybe we could have for us?
No, we would need a tribal designation then, and we don't have that, and I don't think that's a very political issue, but we don't have tribal designation, so we don't get afforded that same consideration.
Okay, so maybe not the same exact thing, but it sounds like something similar where you were saying try to have some kind of exemption for us.
Yes, well, not just us, but the same issues impact American Samoa. The same issues impact the CNMI.
Well, the territories.
The territories.
Territorial governments.
But we have state agencies doing the work. We should be afforded the same consideration.
Okay, we have 3 minutes left. So what do we want people to do? Like in as clear and as brief or as you can explain, what do you want people to do? There's 1 or 2 meetings coming up, yeah?
There are 2 meetings coming up. Show up to the meetings. That's you showing up for yourself. That's you showing up for your island. That's you showing up for your culture. That's you showing up for our natural resources. Show up, learn about the issue, submit a comment. And then tell your friends and family about it.
Are you taking comments there, or it's like homework and they have to take it home?
No, that's why we want to write it with people, so that we can collect comments there. But we'll still have additional time after that, because the comment period closes October 24th, which is, well, it's October 25th for us, but submitted by October 24th so that you're not late.
When are the meetings again? I didn't have it.
October 4th at the Sinahanya Community Center. 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. October 5th at the Inalahan Community Center from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
That's the way to do it. A weekday and a weekend day. That's good.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
At the time when people are off work.
Okay, so this should be out by Tuesday the 24th. So this will be out in time. So that's good. Anything else you got want to add?
I think that sums it up perfectly.
Okay, Brent. In less than 2 minutes, what do we have on the table? What's this?
Oh, this is a poster going over some of the regulations for fishing for Guam, and giant clams are on here. This also is a sign we are already regulating giant clam take on Guam. The regulations are you can't take more than 3 pieces per person per day, and they have to be at least 7 inches across on the shell. You can't take smaller than that. 7 inches allows for them to reach sexual maturity, so those clams have most likely reproduced before you've taken them, so there will be another generation coming up.
Okay.
Those are the 2 regulations for giant clam take on Guam right now.
Have you ever enforced this?
Yes.
Oh, wow, okay. Want to tell me about a quick case?
I haven't personally.
The COs, I imagine, the conservation officers.
I've recommended, I've notified the COs of undersized clam take, and they have responded to it.
Okay, so this isn't just hypothetical. We already have laws on our books to control the resources within our waters, and we are acting on it.
Yes.
Maybe not at the scale we would like, but...
There have also been arrests in the MPAs for taking clams, both beyond the data limit as well as just taking from the MPA. And we've handled several of those cases as well.
Okay. So thank you guys very much for your time and for sharing your thoughts and opinions. Just putting it out there. If there's someone on the other side of this who would like to see this come through, please get in touch if you want to talk to me, or if I can facilitate a conversation between yourselves and anyone here. Let me know. I would like to hear both sides of it, although I'm not sure how good of a case you're gonna have, because this is a touchy one for sure, because it's not just the animal, it's taking our control away, as I understand it, and taking a bit of our culture away. Like, our culture is going to have to pass through a federal filter, and that doesn't feel right. All right. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Guam Guy Show. And thank you to my guests for joining me today. All right. See you on the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.